How do I connect to a Linux server remotely from a Windows 10 PC? I think we should find out. If your main workstation is a Windows 10 workstation and you need to connect to a Linux server remotely, then the best way to do that is to use something called SSH, which is Secure Shell. SSH. SSH works with a private key and a public key. SSH is a secure way to connect to remote systems because data is encrypted as it's sent back and forth. The steps to do this is to install, first of all, install the SSH feature on Windows 10. Secondly, we need to generate these keys. And thirdly, we need to copy the public key to the remote Linux system. In this demonstration, I've created a virtual environment and I've put it on the 10.0.10.0/24 network, and I have given this Linux server an IP address of 10.0.10.101. On the Windows 10 workstation, I'll go to Settings, and then I'll go to Apps. And in Windows 10, there's a built-in SSH client, which can be installed using these optional features. I'll add a feature, and I'll search for SSH, and I want to install the SSH client. Once the SSH client is installed, I can close this down and I will open up PowerShell. Now that the SSH client is installed, we can actually go ahead and we can connect to the server using the IP address of the server, which in this case is 101. You'll see I'm using the SSH command there. Then I'm using my username on the server that we're connecting to. And then I'm using the IP address of the server I want to connect to, which is a Linux server. Press return. And I say yes to this. So you can see I'm now connected to the Linux server. And all seems well. The next thing I want to do is I want to be able to connect to this server without having to enter a password in every single time. The way to do that is to generate a public key that I can send over to the server so that it can use that key to authenticate rather than ask me for a password every time. And we use the SSH Keygen command to generate those keys. The keys are saved by default to your user profile in that folder there. I'm going to accept that location. I'm going to leave the passphrase empty so we don't have to enter another password in. And this tells me that the keys have been generated. I can check if those keys have been generated by looking in that folder using the list command. And you'll see that I have the private key and I have the public key. This is the key that we want to copy over to the remote system. To do that, I'm going to be using some Linux commands, and the first one is the cat command. What the cat command does is to just output the contents of a file. So for example, if I was to output the contents of the private key, that's what the cat command will give me, and that's what the keys are. That's what the SSH key files are. So I'll just clear the screen, and what I will do is just type out a command, and I'll explain what it does in a second. What this command does is to output the contents of that public key, and it pipes it, this is the pipe symbol, to the connection we establish using SSH to the remote server, and then it sends it to this file here, which is the authorized keys file in the SSH directory on the remote server, in my profile on the remote server there. So let's run it. And now that key should be on the remote Linux server. Now when I connect over SSH, I'm not prompted for a password. This is useful if you're managing lots of Linux systems, especially as a system administrator, or other devices remotely over SSH. It's very secure and it makes life easier for system administrators. I hope you found this useful, and that's it for this episode. If you're new at STech Systems, the IT Skills Library is a collection of questions and answers to build your IT skills one answer at a time. Subscribe now and start building your skills today.